I have always wanted to build a mini camper. I barely know anything about carpentry, so being small makes the project less intimidating, and it's a fun puzzle to fit all the necessities for living into a tiny space. How much better if that space could move itself? Hi, I'm Ben, and in this video we will be building a drivable mini camper, perfect for following trails deep into the woods with a footprint barely larger than one sheet of plywood. Independent hydraulic drives to the front wheels means that I can turn on a dime and easily power through both mud and snow. Finally, if I do get stuck, the camper is light enough that I can pick it up and move it. Total cost for this project, including the furnishings on the inside, was less than $2,000. Yeah, you should probably build one too. On this channel, we usually explore science, inventions, or outdoor projects like waterproofing fabric. And this crazy thing I've made does tie in with those past and future projects, which we'll talk about as we move along. The secret to this camper is that I didn't have to build the drivetrain from scratch. This is a zero-turn lawnmower. In particular, it's a 48-inch cut Cub Cadet, which I bought used for $500. At that price, anything you buy is going to have a few problems, starting with, in my case, not starting. The battery was very dead on arrival, leaving me to push the mower off into the snow so I could return the rental trailer. There it sat until I could come back with a new battery to get the mower started and get this thing into the barn. This mower had been pretty neglected, so it was time for some basic maintenance, changing the oil, spark plugs, air filter, before beginning to tear the whole mower apart to get rid of every cosmetic piece of trim and anything which would not be useful for its new life as a camper frame. The neat thing about these mowers that made me consider one for my build is the independent hydraulic drives for the back wheels. Turning right or left is done by pulling on the control arms to change the speed or direction of the wheel on that side. When the wheels are turning in opposite directions, it rotates the mower, so you can turn around without even moving forward. It's much cheaper to buy an old mower than it would be to buy all the parts separately to make a vehicle from the ground up that could turn like this. Plus, the motor is already set up with a powered belt clutch that normally spins the blades to cut grass. For our purposes, this pulley could power anything that we can figure out how to attach to the camper, from an electric generator to a wood chipper, snowblower. What could we use this for? Give me some ideas in the comments. Anyways, one of the most obvious improvements we can make to the mower is to replace the tires with something more suitable for driving off-road. The front pivoting tires can be replaced with solid foam rubber versions that are impossible to puncture. And for the back, I found these much grippier ATV tires, which will certainly improve traction and the overall look of the project. The treads, you might notice, are facing the wrong way because my plan was to build the camper so that it faces backwards on the mower. I am generally terrible at planning my projects, and mostly just hope that I'll figure out the next step when I come to it. I knew that the camper frame would have to box in the motor with enough space overhead to allow airflow and access to refill the oil and other such things. This would have to be at a higher level than the rest of the frame, which would be built over the mower floorboard, and somehow I would attach the two platforms to one another later. I was being conscious at this point that I might want to take the camper off the mower frame in the future, maybe to have better access for repairs or to replace the mower entirely. I ended up attaching the frame with a total of 10 bolts, all of them accessible without taking other things apart. So I've set a challenge for myself of doing a better job this year of tying my projects together. We often investigate deep science stuff, outdoor skills, heating and cooling energy sort of projects, and these topics can feel disconnected. I need a common thread, a long-running project that grows and evolves with us as we learn a variety of new skills. This is the purpose that I hope this mini camper will serve. When we invent new cooling paint, thermal batteries, or waterproof fabric, this camper is an opportunity to test our inventions at a practical scale. It might be a totally different thing a year from now, with built-in atmospheric water collectors and a radiative cooling ceiling. Time will tell. I was a bit nervous about firing up the mower for the first time after tearing it apart. I had to disconnect and reroute most of the wiring, and I couldn't be sure if it was put back together correctly. The control arms for the steering were also partially disconnected, and it was questionable if starting the engine would send me spinning into the wall of my workshop. This will be the first time that I've actually fired this mower up since I've torn it apart, so here is hoping that it will work. And I gotta get myself in a position where if it starts kind of going out of control, that I'm not gonna get fucked off it. Turns out that this thing is kind of fun. So the motor still works and my frame seems pretty solid. The platform felt a lot bigger while I was working on it, but now seeing myself driving around, I'm reminded just how small this camper is. I love it. It is so much fun. From here, I still had a few things to install in the front panel to finish off rerouting the controls to what will be the inside of the camper. The throttle, choke, and battery life monitor are all better off being here, even if this were still in use as a mower. And that's all my fears relieved for how I would control this from the inside. Now it's just about building the rest of the camper on top. As I mentioned, I am not good at planning, so figuring out the details of the camper's shape was put off until now. I knew I would need a sloped roof so that water would run off, and that's about all I had for design requirements. Using a few boards and clamps, I played with the shape until I thought it looked okay, and had enough headroom to be relatively comfortable. By writing down the height and spacing of the vertical posts, I can recreate this shape in the workshop. I still have no idea at this point what the front window will look like or how it will fit with the rest of the design, but that's a problem for later. As I built the framing, my main concern was to make sure it added rigidity and strength to the floor sections, connecting them into one solid unit. I was trying to keep it lightweight, so I switched from the 2x4s used in the floor to 2x3s for the upper framing. The back wall of the camper will be 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide, with the camper door in the middle of this wall. My dad was actually a real carpenter, and I didn't know him as that for very long because of a chronic illness. But as I built this, something came back into memory that he taught me when I was young. To make posts like this perfectly square, you can use a board wedged between them to push the posts into alignment. This holds them in place while you add small triangle braces to the corners to lock in the shape. A really simple thing, but exactly what I needed. And it came with a memory that I really wasn't expecting to stir up with this project. This is a few weeks in, and finally I'm starting to get a vision for how this camper will actually look and feel in the end. The framing adds a lot of strength, and I'm pretty happy with the angle of the roof, at least in the back. I added the downward slope to the front and realized that I better figure out the shape of the front window before going any further. Originally I imagined a vertical hexagon shape of some kind, but when I drew it out on a piece of paper, the steep angle of the roof just didn't look good. And not only because it was drawn so poorly, the vertical window was also very goofy looking. If I raised the pitch of the roof to make more room for the window, and then also tilted the window backwards slightly, the design started to look a lot more interesting. Less like something Jar Jar Binks would drive, and maybe more like a vehicle out of Halo, if I'm being really generous to myself. The problem is that it was already daunting to consider how to make a hexagon-shaped window, and forming it to sit at an angle means that I need to think even harder about how to make it from a flat sheet. I made a little hexagon frame that sits where the top of the window will rest, and then took a bunch of measurements until I sort of understood how to lay out the fold pattern on a giant sheet of acrylic. You might think that making giant bends in acrylic would be a difficult process, but it's really very easy. The trick is to only apply heat exactly where you need it. So you clamp a board to either side of your sheet and use another board to form a small channel with the bend line running through the gap. These boards help to focus the heat from a hot air gun right along the bend without warming the surrounding plastic. You want to swing the heat gun back and forth with very steady, even passes, and just let the weight of the board slowly drag the acrylic down as it heats up. You don't want to force this, just keep adding even heat until gravity or very gentle pressure completes the bend for you. Super easy, and the result is amazing. One tip that I'll give for cutting acrylic is that it works really well to use a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder or Dremel, instead of using an actual saw. The abrasive wheels make quick work through the plastic without causing cracks. And with that, the window is ready to be framed in with some trim pieces, and I think it turned out pretty great. So happy with that. But I should probably take this window off until I'm done with the rest of the camper, so I don't risk scratching it, even through the protective film that is currently on the outside. Yeah. The idea of making these small mobile living spaces for a lot of people is the charm of being able to disappear, away from unwanted distractions. Digitally, that's a bit harder to accomplish, and to disconnect yourself from telemarketers and scammers online, you really need someone to step in on your behalf, like Delete Me, my sponsor for this video. There are companies out there called data brokers who basically make money by collecting your private information and selling it to scammers, telemarketers, and anyone that wants to know more about you. Illegally, data brokers have to stop selling your information if you ask them to, but there are thousands of them, and you might spend 20 minutes on each site figuring out how to fill out a takedown request. Delete Me scans the internet for you, digging up data brokers that have your information and submitting takedowns on your behalf. This is just some of the sites that they submitted takedowns for in the first few weeks that I used them. If you'd like to make it a lot harder on telemarketers, scammers, and identity thieves to get your information and that of those you care about, check out Delete Me. You can get a 20% discount on a US consumer plan by using my link, joindeleteme.com/Nighthawk, and using the code Nighthawk on checkout. With that, the shape of the camper is now set in stone and the framing is done. My wife came out to take her first ride as I pulled the camper into the yard to start work on the siding. I debated about using various unconventional materials for my siding and roof panels, but 1/4-inch plywood was the easy choice for the time being. This is one area that I think will get some heavy experimentation in future videos, as I have lots of ideas about cheap or free building materials that could replace plywood. The back of the camper will of course be the entrance, and I decided a compound door that could optionally lift up as an awning would be a really nice option. This whole back panel will be able to swing up on these hinges, and in the middle I'll cut a smaller door that will be more convenient for normal use. It was during this step, as I was assembling the camper door, that it suddenly hit me that I was confident about what I was doing. I started this project second-guessing everything, and I still of course know that an expert carpenter could build a door so much better than mine. But something had changed in me. I had reached the point in learning a new skill where I learned what it takes not to make something perfect, but to make something adequate. This is one of my secrets for how I learned the wide variety of subjects that we explore on this channel. If you wish you had a certain skill, just set yourself a goal that requires learning it along the way and dive in. I promise, if you stick through the project until the end, no matter how bad it turns out, you will know how to do it better next time. And that's not even the best part. The most important thing you discover when you learn new things is that you are capable of learning new things. You can learn. You can change. If you gain nothing else along the way, gaining confidence in your own ability to try things without fear of how bad you might be at them is so worth it. The paint that I've been laying down here as we've been talking is actually not paint, but an opaque wood stain. This is a much more durable coating than paint and should repel water much more effectively over time. Hopefully this resists the elements well enough for the siding to remain in good shape for a few years at least, although we may replace it before then if future experiments require it. For the inside of the camper, I wanted a brighter color so that it would reflect light and be well illuminated by the front window. And this also seemed like a good opportunity to use up a can of intumescent fireproof paint that I've had sitting on a shelf for quite a while. You're supposed to use this within a month of opening, and I think I opened this 4 years ago. Needless to say, this needed a lot of mixing, and probably lost some of its efficacy. This type of paint is amazing, and I can't believe it's not standard in every new home. Intumescent paint, when exposed to a flame, generates expanding carbon foam, insulating the material behind it from catching on fire, and thereby limiting new fuel, which causes fires to spread. It is amazing stuff, and if I ever repaint my own home, I would definitely use an intumescent paint. The only downside to this type of paint is that I don't think anyone sells a variety that is suitable for outdoor use. So, for example, you can't paint the outside of a house to protect it from forest fires. Kind of a bummer, since that's the main purpose that comes to mind for a lot of people. Inventing an intumescent paint that can resist outdoor weather may very well be a project on my to-do list. After painting, it was finally time to add a roof, starting by cutting the panels to size and staining them. Again, I don't think these will be my permanent roof solution, but a good oil-based stain and a few coats of polyurethane should be durable enough to repel water for maybe a couple of years without maintenance. Probably these will just be the underlayment for another roof covering that I tack on later. I realized that the plywood roof would be a little short of overhanging the walls of the camper, and I would need something to protect from water seeping in along the top edge. It turns out that many roofs don't use an overhang, and keeping water out is a problem common enough to have its own section at my local home improvement store. I'll leave it to your own imagination as to how I got these 12-foot long pieces of aluminum drip edging home from the store in my Chevy Impala. As I stained and varnished the roof panels and added the edging, I was also doing several other projects simultaneously. I added a fold-down bed just prior to painting that matches in height with the nose of the camper. This will be nice for watching the stars through the front window, and of course I'll also need a curtain for privacy and sleeping in when needed. I also cut a pine board down to be a small countertop, and in this I cut space for a steel bowl to act as a sink, and another space for a propane burner. This will of course have to sit above the surface, obviously, so that the counter isn't exposed to too much heat. Finally, I made a few shelves to go in the camper, one maybe to hold books, and another for a water jug above the sink. After several long days, the many coats of polyurethane applied to the roof panels had dried, and I could finish the installation. I intentionally left a gap between the roof panels at the peak, realizing that I might want more light inside the camper. So I once again made use of my acrylic bending skills to make a transparent ridge cap. This was a different kind of acrylic. I guess it's safety glass. It was a little bit harder to bend than the standard stuff, but it did eventually work with a little extra heat. I held this to the roof with a few corner brackets that had been modified slightly by over-bending them, and then they could be screwed to the roof in such a way that the plexiglass would cover the screw head once it was slid into place. Nice and weatherproof. And now we have a little skylight to show off the woodwork and brighten things up. And now the last step before we can see the camper in its finished state is to reinstall the window. And, of course, I had forgotten that the trim had screws for which the roof would definitely be in the way, so that was partially undone to finish the installation. I have been looking forward to peeling the film off this for several weeks. Very satisfying. I forgot there was one last step of adding a few trim pieces on the outside to cover the seam in the plywood and just make things look fancy. Then adding some mirrors to the forward pillars, which it turns out are very necessary. Since this camper pivots around the front wheels, the back end swings around violently, and you really need to know if there's anything in the way. And with that, the outside of the camper is finished. So you can see that I moved the driving position right up to the nose by adding handle extensions to the control arms. I think it is more fun to drive this way, but the main reason that I did this is to put more weight on the front wheels. Much of the camper's weight is over the smaller pivoting wheels by default, which makes it difficult to get enough traction where you need it. Sitting up front solves this issue nicely. So much fun. It's hard to believe that this was once a lawnmower. Well, maybe not from that perspective, because I know you can still see the mower and tires through here. These are not open to air, by the way. I added some plexiglass windows because I thought it would be nice to be able to see the tires while I was driving. At the time, not realizing that I wouldn't be driving from down here, but up on this top platform. The key features on the inside of this camper are also now mostly finished. I added fencing staples to key locations on the shelves to attach bungee cords to keep everything in place. You have to remember when adding things to a camper that it's going to move. So important things like the stove and heavy things like the water supply need to be super secure. For the water jug, bungee cord was not enough, so I actually held this in place with a piece of real metal wire. I also used a secondary attachment point on the top handle. For some reason, the first question that everyone has asked when I've sent them pictures of this camper is, where is the bathroom? It's good to have your priorities straight, I guess. Behind the counter is this, a folding toilet. You fill this with a bag liner and then you can add kitty litter or use it as is. I probably could have added a built-in toilet to this camper in one way or another, but I think it would be hard to beat the compactness and convenience of this design. With that, you might be wondering a little bit about privacy. Well, in the extra space on my bookshelf, I keep a blackout curtain for the front window. And this serves multiple purposes. This is a white curtain on one side and black on the other. If I hang this in the front window with the white surface facing outward, it will reflect sunlight and keep the camper much cooler in the summer. Flipped the other way, and the black surface absorbs light and becomes a solar heater. With the bed folded down, this is just a super comfy space. Room for at least one person to sit up here in the nose and two others on the bed. Only one person could probably sleep in here comfortably, although I think that my wife and I could make do if I made a little extension to extend the bed to the edge of the counter here. As it is, it's really nice to have this gap because it's the perfect amount of room to sit here and make your breakfast. The really fun part about having a camper this small is thinking about how to pack a bunch of functionality into every corner. And there is still a ton of space in here that I have not filled yet. My son is less than 2 years old, and it'll be a few years before he's taller than the 4-foot span between these walls. So I was thinking I could maybe make a bunk bed that goes across here. And if I extended the platform bed to go all the way to the sink, my whole family could come climbing out of this clown car in the morning. I don't know that my wife would be as into that idea as I am. I think it would be pretty awesome. Speaking of safety, I have an essential of every camper here, a carbon monoxide detector. Now, I still have many small things that need finishing before this build is ready for a trip into the woods, like adding window screens to all the vents to keep bugs out, and closing in the gaps where drafts can get in. But one of the more pressing tasks is that the exhaust of the engine currently exits in front and underneath of the camper. That's bad, and I certainly need to fix that before driving off into the sunset. But for now, the last thing I'll do is add some good books to my shelf and enjoy the fruit of my labor in my own backyard. I can't believe I had this book. Oh man, would have been nice to read this before I started on this project. You know, as I was thinking about what books I might like to have on my little shelf here, I was thinking about my place and purpose on YouTube. what am I doing here? And what am I doing when I consume endless streams of YouTube videos myself? I might even consume too many books, although that, of course, seems like a drop in the bucket compared to other forms of media. This might be the 20th video you've watched today. And are you going to remember anything about it? You don't have to remember things for them to affect who you are and who you're becoming. But if you want to change for the better, I think it does take some intentional effort of memory. I find that when I read a really dense book or even watch a really detailed video, there could be 20 things that you could take away from it, but if I try to absorb all of them, I don't remember anything in particular that changes what I do the next day. If I can remember and apply just one thing from the stuff I consume in a day or even a week, it's so much better than trying to take in 20 things, but applying none of them. And I think that is the state that many of us find ourselves in. And I hope maybe with this video that something you've watched today won't just mindlessly wash past you. Just remember one thing today with intentional purpose, write it down and let it affect your thoughts for a few days at least. Well, it is not at all required, and I am so happy that you're here with me. But if you would like to support the creation of these videos directly so that I don't have to worry about this being the lowest viewed month of YouTube that I've had in 15 years, I would be so very grateful for you to check out my Patreon. And that's all I'll say about that. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you next time. I can't believe I had this. This belonged to my grandfather and then my father after him. Maybe finally I will start putting some of this genetic carpentry knowledge to use. See you all next time.